Hi, this is Jack Skeels, CEO of AgencyAgile. Welcome to this episode of essentially how poor scoping and handoffs fuel agency burnout. Let's get started today. Bring up the presentation. Go share that. And also for those of you attending live, please remember the Q&A panel. I'll bring mine up over on the second screen here. And at the end, we'll be able to go into Q&A where I can turn your microphones on as well if you want to actually have a discussion about anything, which often happens, especially with this webinar. This is the most commented on webinar of all the ones we have, I believe. So, all right, boom. You can see the person lying on the ground all gassed out. Me, 15 years more of Fortune 500 management and technology consulting. Got my MBA out here on the left coast. I'm based in Orange County, California. I spent several years as a senior RAND analyst and also then later a researcher, which is like a step up in management sciences and organizational design. After that, and sort of in the middle of that, I ended up working at an agency in executive roles and then running Sapiens Los Angeles office, 105 person Los Angeles, sorry about that, just burping something, 105 person Los Angeles office. And I realized agencies are different and this whole thing is different than I ever imagined. Fortunately, the work I'd done at RAND actually informed a lot of that. And I went from digital agency executive to being a consultant, doing what we've been doing now for about 14 plus years, almost 15 years. It'll come up, I think, in 3 months or so. I've sort of capped some of that off, not that I'm done doing it, but with a book called Unmanaged, which has gotten some nice reviews from independent reviewers and customers, 5 stars on Amazon, 4.3 on Goodreads. And we won our 3rd award. And you submit just like advertising awards. You just submit your book. You send it in with a $50 check kind of thing. And we won 3 this year, which is really great. It always amazes me because I can't read the damn thing after writing it for so long. But it's available on Amazon. I think it's on sale, if I remember right, I think we did through the end of the year. It's only $9.95 or $13.95 or something like that. So it's a great deal. Certainly dollars per page is a great bargain, but it's got a lot of the ideas I'll talk to you about today in here. Now, let's get started. This is an Australian gray hamster. And the question he's asking you is, what is your rework rate? For most agencies, this is 25 to 40%. And why? Now, I left the slide in by accident. Sorry about that. But why? So rework rate is this idea that you thought it was going to be 1,000 hours and it turned out to be 1,300 hours. And this is rework. You can call it overage rate. Like if it's a scope you didn't discover, you might call it overage or scope creep. Actual blended rate. I mean, there are all kinds of names for this thing. But the easiest way to calculate it, if you want to use my numbers, say how many hours did we think we were going to spend on it versus how many we actually did. But this is a big number, 25 to 40%. That means, because if you could actually squish that a little bit or a lot, you could save a lot of money. And that's, in fact, one of the main things we teach agencies how to do. Why it's that way is there's a contagious cycle of poor briefing and mishandled scope and mishandled assumptions about scope that actually drives this rate up. And you can see it as an agency grows and gets more clients and more work. You can see this sort of rework rate dialing up, and there's this sort of contagion thing going on. I'm going to take you through how that works, and it's from 2 different perspectives. And like I said, there's another scoping webinar coming up. So one of the things, keep in mind that clients are innately unknowledgeable about what you do, but they're actually a greater risk than you are, right? If you screw up, they may face career problems, right? Okay. But if you screw up, you just go on to the next client typically. A lot of times clients don't understand what's going on or who's working on their stuff. And in reality, and we've shown this over the years working with hundreds of agencies, clients don't change scope as often as you think they do. Often what they're doing is they're defining the scope you hadn't defined. You mismanaged how you were defining scope, and so now they define it for you. Virtually every client you work with has worked with other agencies before, and the fact that you're there means there's a trail of bones and tears that preceded you. And so that's an ultimate act of optimism to be a client working with an agency or a shop. Now, take it to the other side, and agencies will say, well, hey, the hardest thing is clients. Well, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, clients are always the hardest part of any business. And the greatest challenge, uh, one survey done by Campaign a couple of years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago now, said that clients limit creativity, right? And of course, are responsible for scope changes. And put more bluntly, at a DigiDay conference I was at, several of the agency CEOs, managing directors at my lunch table agreed that clients are stupid. Okay, well, hey, so get over it, right? Okay, and they get even because the average client net promoter score, that is how clients rate agencies, is 17. This is on a -100 to +100 scale, but 17 is like, the cable company kind of thing, or some form of bad service. Why is it hard to be an agency? There are a whole bunch of reasons. And I have a couple other webinars about what is intrinsically difficult, and it's called NOCO, naturally occurring chaos, right? And so agencies are naturally occurring chaotic organizations. You go on our website, you'll find a webinar on it. We don't charge or anything like that. So I encourage you to read it. It'll tell you a lot about, or listen to it, watch it. It'll tell you a lot about how to think about your agency as the challenged organization that is, to enable you to manage it better. Among the many things that this chaos, this naturally occurring chaos, results in, delivery quality challenges. We're too busy to actually develop our people, capability development challenges. We're too busy to actually make well integrated work. We're just getting the work done. So collaboration challenges. Of course, rework rate means slower delivery velocity because you're doing it over and over. And all of this brings around a level of craziness and resource management priority, who's working on what, and a larger group of managers that are necessary, then are really necessary to run the organization. Okay, so it just sort of creates this very crazy, busy, hard, difficult situation. That's what an agency looks like. Almost all scope challenges, you can get scope pretty right if you know how to do it. It's not a one-time thing. It's a life cycle process, and you'll see how this comes out in just a few minutes here. So essentially, it's a string of failures on agency. I'm going to give you five tips on some things you can do. I can tell you there are probably 12 or more of these things. We have another webinar. I forget what it's called. I'm not sure if it's up on the website yet. I've only done a couple runs of it. It's called the $1 Million Margin Massacre. And I talk about the broken scope cycle. I talk about 13 different failure points, 12 different failure points. So there's a lot of different ways this thing breaks. Okay. Did you do something wrong? No, this is intrinsic to your business. But yeah, if you're not managing it right, then you are doing something wrong, because it is manageable. Yes, you can get things done, but getting things done is not the same thing as getting things done well and have everyone be happy about it, right? And so most agencies live somewhere between those 2 points, getting enough done that you don't go out of business, and nowhere near the, hey, we're getting everything done, doing it really well, and everyone's really happy about it. One thing you'll notice, if you can step back, like go on a vacation, come back, and you realize while you were gone, the chaos didn't end. It's a constant feature of the agency. And so getting above that and figuring out how to look at the organization and where we need to do things different, even though it feels impossible, actually is the way to solve these sorts of problems. I don't know why. I've got all kinds of, like, my bodily, I'm sneezing, I got a runny nose all of a sudden. Okay. So the idea I want to borrow here is this thing called the business flywheel. Okay. Business flywheel is this, Jim Collins, Good to Great, brought this up, is this virtuous cycle that we got self-reinforcing things that happen inside the organization. A flywheel, if you're young enough to not know what the hell it is, you can see it here. It's that big wheel. It keeps momentum going, right? So when the engine needs a little help, it can sort of use the flywheel to keep it going, right? And Google it. You can find it all over the internet. You'll see here's like an example of someone did the Amazon flywheel, right? Where one thing leads to another, et cetera. And all those things are things that are synergistic with growth, with the key function. How does Amazon get big, right? So there's an agency flywheel. Well, not really. Okay, yours works a little bit differently, and that's why we call it the agency hamster wheel. Okay, because that's what it feels like. It's the agency hamster wheel. It starts with this problem that we are so busy. So we're just going to start in the middle because we're not going to spin this thing up. Show up. You're too busy. You're too busy to scope well. Okay, and you're too busy. You scope oblivious to ignorance. Okay. Everyone thinks they scope well, but they don't, because one of the things they don't focus on is how do we identify ignorance, what we don't know. Now, ignorance is a fundamental part of the business, and it's an essential to creativity. I'll explain that, but it's also one of the key drivers in the hamster wheel. When I say ignorance, what I mean is that in this graph, so how well we understand the project is the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is the life cycle of the project, right? If we take most projects in the real world, like building a house, that's what this black line is. On the left is a blueprint, on the right is the house. We don't gain a lot of understanding over time, right? Okay, because that blueprint should describe the house well, and the house should look like the blueprint, vice versa, right? So there's not a lot of ignorance inside this project. Agencies start out with a lot more ignorance. And ignorance means that it's hard to plan projects because, and you'll hear this, if you ask a creative early in a project or campaign, how long do you need to do that and what do you need? They'll say, I don't know. We haven't figured out what we're even doing yet. Okay. But that's not what an architect would say. Architect would say, yeah, we're building a 3-bedroom house, that kind of thing, right? How successful are your projects? By the way, everyone survived this thing, but it is a great example of how a lot of projects run. The reason I bring this up is that a lot of people in agencies say, I used to ask this question all the time, say their projects are successful. Then I ask them this, I say, okay, here's how we describe success. Success was everything's on, it's that end of the spectrum, right? It's a great project, everyone's happy, all that kind of thing. Challenged is when you just barely get it done and a bunch of other challenges happen during it. Of course, failed is sort of rare. But the reality in project management, by the way, is project management for work that's fairly innovative, not even as innovative as agency work, looks something like this. Okay. So it's hard to get projects right and the like. And it turns out, I'll show you another version of this later, agencies don't have the failure rate here, but that's not necessarily, it creates some other problems, which we call contagion. But realize that the belief that you can actually plan things and do things well when you don't know a lot is actually not true, and it creates a lot of problems. Everyone pretends like project management works well, and that's not a very good failure rate. Agency projects are even worse, okay? And like I said, the typical project overage rate, and that's why I brought it up, is if we're doing such a great job of project management, project planning, why are these numbers like this? Okay. The problem really is that the type of scope that matters the most is a scope you don't talk about. And scope is it's out of scope or unknown. The we have a systematic problem in our brains which says we'll talk about the things we know, and we don't know how to have conversations about the things we don't know. There are a lot of reasons in the sales process where we drive to, let's just get the deal done, we'll figure out the rest. Like that's a good solution. It's not necessarily the best solution. It's not the only solution. I'll show you, this is from our trainings that we do. This is an agency called Blue Cadet in Philadelphia many years ago. And not that long ago, but several years ago, I should say. This is $2 million project. And you notice like the blue and the purple and the yellow cards, those are all scope descriptions, right? The red cards, which there are a ton of, okay, the red cards are missing scope, okay? The scope that this is a signed deal, by the way, okay? They literally found 30%, a couple $1 million project, 30%. We actually did one with an automotive company about right around the same time, maybe the next year from that, I think it's 2019. where the gap in scope was 200% in a multi-million-dollar project. And they canceled the project once they figured that out, but we saved them a lot of misery, right? So the idea that the scope we haven't talked about, it gets us in trouble, is something that if you wrap your head around that, then you say, maybe we're not talking about things in the right way. And it turns out that, remember, this is why this happens. In fact, if you look at the data behind this and the research that goes with it, basically 60% of the cause of this is that people aren't talking about scope in enough detail, and there's not enough alignment between all the people, including the end customer, client, all the way through the people doing the work. So the reality is that most agency projects are challenged, okay? And they struggle in some way. Okay? Now, what ends up happening is, because we're too busy to scope well and we scope oblivious to ignorance, we actually can't brief well either. Okay, and we have and if we haven't briefed well, then we don't know how to actually realign on scope, because we have a bunch of missing information that people actually can't even talk about because it's not being talked about, right? And so what happens is we see this phenomenon here as the work comes into the agency. This is sort of the same graph I showed you before, but I'm going to stage it out here. When we bring a piece of work in, we think projects will work well. In fact, we're amazingly optimistic creatures. We think, oh, hey, that's cool. A client let us know they want to do something for a holiday, right? And we'll talk it over with a couple folks, and we'll talk about all the things it could be, and systematically avoid talking about things that can't be. And someone, like I used to be a group account director, will type this up, put it in a spreadsheet, whatever, attach it to a contract and get it signed. We must understand the project. Now, you've got a signed contract, but it's actually a bombshell in a way. But the way we behave is if we actually know everything still, and we hand it off to the team, and I'm sure they'll just find a problem or two, but that's cool, they'll fix it. This is how we behave, okay? But it's not what the reality is. The reality, okay, despite the obvious, okay, the obvious is that that line can't be correct if this pie chart is correct, and the pie chart is empirically correct, okay? The actual line looks like this, and it has these very interesting predictable experiences. One of which is, as we're bringing that deal in, we're riding high through the poppy field on the plateau of optimism. We're there thinking, wow, hey, how hard could it be? We've got plenty of time, plenty of budget. Don't worry. We've never done this before, but hey, it can't be that hard to learn. You'll find a good contractor. My favorite being, what can't we do for $150,000, which is the single best way to find out what you can't do for $150,000. So we book the deal and we hand it off to the team, and then the hard parts begin. One is the chasm of despair that the team goes into. The team basically looks at this and says, oh, there are a whole bunch of unanswered questions. Did you guys actually think this through? Why didn't you talk to us sooner? Which is a great clue, by the way. But at the end of the day, we got to get the project done, and the team works going out Mount Death March through trial and error, trying to get this project to work right. This is essentially what we call the ignorance gap. It's the difference between how ignorant we thought we were, which is not much after we signed the contract, to how actually ignorant we really were, which is still pretty ignorant once we've signed a contract, and we're going to find out the answers the hard way. Now, it's interesting. I was at a conference where there's a behavioral research, organizational researcher, and she said, there's a really interesting data set on this you want to look at. And that is called the front of house, back of house model risk. It's a risk avoidance model, I think it's called. It turns out that people working on the left-hand side here in a normal, healthy organization are far more comfortable with these characteristics, often called VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But these are the 6 factors in the work. Far more comfortable with the idea of, well, we don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll get it done. How hard could it be, right? And the people, of course, on the other side, the back of house, are in fact very concerned about these things, as they should be, because minimizing these things makes getting the work done a lot easier. And what we do is we brief from left to right. We take a bunch of people who don't care about the hard parts and have briefing a bunch of people that do care about the hard parts. And usually if they do it like me, they do it too fast and nobody gets it, absorbs it, that kind of thing. Yeah, I wasn't good at briefing. I was a group account director with a $6 million bag and I did shitty briefings all the time, but I felt like I was doing a great job because I had a beautiful PowerPoint and could speak quickly. Now, so we've got these bad handoffs, right? So we're not briefing well. So we end up with our teams being somewhat clueless and actually clients being clueless because nobody really knows what the scope is right now. We know the things that are in scope mostly, yeah, but we don't know the things that are out of scope at this point. And so we start creating disappointing deliverables. Now, these may or may not leave the building, okay? But if they do leave the building, they end up in the client's hands, right? And so essentially, one of the interesting things that happens is people say, why does client keep changing scope? In general, in this situation, neither the team nor the client really understand the scope and they're discovering it together. And what happens is when you show the client something and they go, no, that's not it. But also what I should have said was X. And by the way, also Y is true. This feels like a scope change for the agency. What do you mean X and Y? You didn't say X and Y before. Well, no, but nobody thought to even ask me about X and Y. So it's not my fault. You guys are supposed to be the master of doing this. And I truly believe agencies need to bear more responsibility for thorough exploration of scope. We teach it, it works really well. And it gets worse. It's a hamster wheel. We got to go all the way around the wheel, right? Here we go. So those disappointing deliverables mean that we're getting in rework land. And that means we're rescuing. It was supposed to be done Friday. Can you get it done by next Tuesday? Rescues, overages, death marches. I'll work the weekend and see if I can get it finished. And this causes a beautiful thing called project contagion, which we see inside of agencies all the time. Agencies that don't allow projects to fail because it's so costly, so they rescue. That little red sliver was a big red wedge before. And so agencies will rescue those projects and make sure that their failure rates are very, very low, right? But here's the problem. Where do you get the people to do the rescue with? Because that project they were on, they were booked for the next project starting Monday after they finished the project Friday. So now I'm hammering Monday's project. Which projects suffer the most? Yeah, the good projects. The projects have plenty of budget, plenty of time, all that kind of thing. This is contagion. It's a very interesting effect. What it says is bad projects with bad scope will destroy your good projects. Okay. And this is why, if you've ever heard this, I hear this all the time. Someone saying, we had 8 weeks to do this. Why are we only starting now with 3 weeks left? Because of contagion, shoot up those other 5 weeks, the resources you needed to actually get that thing going. More than half of the misery inside an agency is caused by this sort of circular scope challenges as we go around the hamster wheel. Project contagion then means my general posture, my agency client management group, they're basically saying, sorry, we're late. Hey, don't worry, we'll get it fixed. And it's how can we just deliver? How can we just get it done? And so clients start getting a little bit less happy and trying out competitors and our revenue from them goes down or they just go away. And this feeds another part of the cycle as well, which is that we actually need to win new clients all the time just to stay level, okay? Much less to grow. But that means we're going to go throw our best people on the pitches, which means we're pulling our best people out of all these other activities from time to time, creating discontinuities and making it harder to both recover from rework and also get scope right in the first place. And now we're too busy to scope well. In fact, the best place to be in the agency is in that little red text box there, right? That's all promise, no delivery, right? Here's all the things we could do if only our agency wasn't on the hamster wheel. Bummer. What can I do? All right. Well, that's part of the reason why we do these webinars is to let you know that there is something you can do. What we've helped over 200 agencies with is reducing that rework and fixing that hamster wheel cycle And in doing so, we generally are able to increase productive flow. People get more work done when they're doing the right work and they know what it is. And of course, that makes everyone happier. A real quick little bit about us. Of course, industry education like this, teaching people about how scope really works inside the agency client relationship. We also do leadership education, coaching, but we do productivity and transformation programs to solve the scope problem and productivity problem and the like, and also some advisory and coaching. We're pretty well known. Most of the major industry groups recommend us highly. We've got a lot of nice coverage, Wall Street Journal campaign, Adweek, Ad Age, et cetera. 230 something agencies now that we've worked with, and some really nice results. And these are the agencies who adopted our full program, our full core transformation program. So things get a lot better, and of course, nice client satisfaction data as well, but fast ROI on some of the stuff as well. We also have an agency advisory program where we do lightweight advisory, a good way to get involved with us and try us out if you want. We work generally, this is the size agency we work with. We've worked with a large WPP agency, 3,500 person agency, and several multi-hundred agency person agencies and the like. But generally, we work in sort of this boost, startup process structure, sort of boost phase of agencies on their way to being acquired and the like. We've got some great case studies on the website if you want to go take a look. We're happy to spend some time with you sharing that information. I do want to mention just real quickly, we do have the CEO advisory service, which is literally you get my brain or one of our top coaches' brains for 8 hours of consulting, sort of as a retainer, so you can use it hour at a time kind of thing. But we've worked with so many agencies, and we worked in agencies and run agencies and owned agencies. We know how to work in all these different areas. So we do dabble in them. It's not a huge part of our business. It is a growing part of our business, but we even do fractional CEO, CFO, not CEO, but COO, CFO, account management, that kind of thing. We do a lot of work in financial management, especially around managerial accounting, if you will. Also, client management. We are revamping, or actually working with 2 clients right now on revamping their account services department and making that better. Of course, we do a lot of work in operations, workflow management systems, how to make them really work for your organization, that kind of thing. And also culture topics and offsite workshops and how to actually restructure the organization to run better as an organization. So anyways, would love to talk to you about any of that if you're interested. Love work meeting new agencies and doing meeting new challenges as well. I promise you 5 ways to get off the hamster wheel. Some of these are do it yourself, do it at home. Others are a little bit more sophisticated, but you may be able to pull it off. We probably use about 20, 25 techniques in our trainings, but these are some of the key ideas, some of the key concepts. Some of this also is in the book. If you want to get the book, it'll help you a little bit in that way. Also, it's not a complete program or anything like that. It's really more the theory behind this. But here's one of the key inflection points. Okay, and this is what the Understanding Scope webinar that we have gets into. We may have it on the website, I'm not positive. But you need to scope twice. It's sort of like the old measure twice, cut once kind of thing. Scope twice, deliver once. Yeah. I should do a paper on that, an article. The idea is that when we're selling, we've got a different set of objectives, which is actually just closing the deal. Once we've got the work, then we should actually take the time. And usually selling happens fast and under pressure and all that kind of thing. Once we've got the deal, we should rescope. And there are ways to rescope that are actually quite significant. You're going to take a margin hit either way, right? You already have contagion and rework rates. You might as well try and see if you can beat the rework and understand. You'd rather know that you're going to go over before you go over, right? It's very costly to go over when you didn't expect it, right? So one of the key things, and you probably got this on the left here, you can see identify the out of scope items. We teach a method for how to involve teams in teams. The people on the right-hand side of the diagram are great at helping you see on the left-hand side what you haven't been looking at. And that includes involving teams in developing scope, actually detailing scope out, which is a great way to hand it off to them. And involve teams in scoping, not in the actual scoping, but confirm the scope with your client as well. And again, it's a set of techniques and the like, but the more you can bring your client in to understand and get aligned with the team on what's being built, the better off things go and the happier clients are as well. This actually solves another problem, which is clients typically both don't know whether their work is being done, don't have a sense of how hard it is or how big it is, but also don't understand what it is in the first place. And these are all career building skills. So the more you can engage with your client and take them on this journey, and again, this is one of those things we teach, team client interaction models and stuff like that, the better off things run. Now, when you do a handoff, one of the biggest problems, and I do go into this in detail in the book, is the speed of knowing versus the speed of learning, okay, or the speed of understanding. If I know something, I teach it, I say it and teach it a lot faster than people trying to receive complex information can receive. And in fact, what we need to do is create a technique, and we've done that, a technique that gets us to be briefing at the speed of the learners, the people that we're trying to hand it off to. Okay? And it's not easy. I've actually seen account people cry when they try to do it because it's so frustrating to have to go that slowly, but it works ridiculously well. So this was me, by the way. That's not me in the picture, but this was me in real life. Is that I would brief for 28 minutes and then a 30-minute meeting and say, "Are there any questions?" And then I imagine everyone's just head is spinning or something like that. And maybe I'd get a question, but then for the next 6 months, I get questions all the time. That I thought, why didn't you ask this back then? But because it doesn't work that way. You've got to make sure people are asking questions, and that takes some special work. Last and not least, and this one's a little bit different, is closing the gap between teams and clients is really, really important. And the more you can do that, the better off client behavior, the better the client behavior becomes. And actually, it creates client sustainment. In other words, clients will stay longer if they know the people they're working with. And in fact, team members work better if they know the client a little bit. Now, this isn't that you should have the client and the team on a Slack together or something like that. But there are a set of ways to actually have them interact that make those things better. And I discovered one early in my career, which is when we did the biweekly briefing with the client. I'd bring team members, and it changed the whole dynamic. I'd make the team members talk. I'd be like, "Hey, you present your material." Okay. And it actually changed the dynamic dramatically because the client actually got to know our people, understand what they're dealing with and the like. And so, yeah, that's a big, big plus that way. Real quick summary for you, and then we'll see if you guys have any questions. Work is hard to define at the beginning. It's an essential part of the business. In fact, essentially, scope doesn't get learned until late. This is the ignorance gap problem. Another thing that, again, on the other webinar I touch on more is just because managers and leaders understand what the work is or what the client's asking for doesn't mean that the right people know. The right people are the client and the team, and often the agency fails at educating both of them. The failure of one project leads to the failure of other projects. And what happens when you've got this going is you look more and more like a commodity provider that promises outlandish things that they never deliver on. Pretty bad situation. And of course, it can be fixed. That's why I'm here. So, anyways, we'll stop there. See if you guys have any questions. I'm going to turn the recording off here as well. I'll stop recording.